Well, I brought a talk with me, but over the last 2 days I wrote another one inspired by this show and by the very excellent tequila. So here goes. I call it 5 Untimely Meditations. Can you hear me, by the way?
We hear that.
Yeah? So we can switch that off if it's noisy. Okay. 5 untimely meditations. First untimely meditation. How does it feel to be online? So, is there anyone here who did not spend some time online in the last 24 hours? Okay, so have you ever been online?
Pardon?
Have you ever been online?
I tried to avoid it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else tries to avoid it? The question is, how does it feel? That I think is quite interesting because there is something about it which is rather different. For instance, in this room, I can say that you, sir, is nearer to me than the gentleman sits over there. Yeah? So there is a clear sense how distance operates. But when you are online, what does it mean to say that someone is nearer to you or more distant? Distance is not measured by meters or centimeters, it's measured by clicks. Yeah? So you can get the sense that there is another logic working in the online environment. Not only there is a new logic, the old categories we cherish and learn to assume as the very basis of our existence, they don't seem to work. Because what I just said about being near and far away and how it is different online, it's also the case in other kind of binary categories as well. So nothing is near or far in this new world, but in the same way, questions of good or bad also lose their meaning. We're so used to evaluate things according to these kind of good or bad categories. But online, if we look at an image, the question is not whether it is a good image or a bad one. The question is how many likes it has, how it was tagged, hashtag, or retweeted. That determines its impact in the world, not whether the image itself is good or bad. These are small examples, and the examples really don't matter. What matters is the principal idea that I'm putting forward in this meditation, that online things are very different. Imperceptibly and unbeknown to ourselves, we kind of let Alice in Wonderland step through the looking glass into a new world that operates on very different premises and according to a very different logic. And this in itself is something not to be forgotten. Because if you forget that, you will really find yourself in deep trouble. Because the reason Alice can survive behind the looking glass or in the underworld is because she learns very quickly to operate according to the logic of this new place. And if you insist on operating with the logic you brought from your three-dimensional existence, where things like near and far have some significance, where values like good and bad are important, where you can distinguish between surface and depth, then you are in trouble, because this world, this boat already sailed. For instance, take something like Skype, as a final example. You can be on Skype with anyone in the world, and that is a kind of closeness and intimacy. You might say, well, it's not that strange, and after all, we're not on an island. But what if you are really on an island, and at the same time can be in touch, in a very intimate contact with anyone, wherever they are. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a kind of situation in which these distinctions between island and not an island don't apply anymore. Yeah? It's both an island and not an island. It's both intimacy and being far away. And these two things operate together, not either or, but as a joint amalgam. So that was my first meditation. I will just add, to put it in a slightly more philosophical context. Since Plato wrote in his Symposium about the nature of images, we kind of learned to accept that the surface of the things is not their true essence. We always seek the real essence somewhere not in the shape of the thing. Appearances, perceptions, we know not to trust them. They are misleading for us. And this is the understanding we got from Plato and the last 2,000 years of art, philosophy, politics, economics, all teach us to mistrust appearances. Yeah, you could even say that one of the main goals of contemporary traditional education is to teach how to go beyond appearances to the real essence of things. But guess what? When we talk about online, there is no distinction between the appearance and the essence. The appearance is the essence. We'll come back to that point later on. But the interesting insight here is that when the surface is produced by technology, the surface is also the essence. So, second untimely meditation, why contemporary art doesn't make sense. So, people often say, I don't get contemporary art. I don't understand contemporary art. So the question to ask a person who says that, but do you understand everything else? Is everything else really makes sense? Does it? What about life? Does it really make sense? Well, one of the interesting things about life is that it is kind of an unresolved paradox. We are here right now, and yet we are finite, so very soon we will be no more. How can you both be and not be at the same time? How can you walk around on this earth in your physical, sensual presence, while at the same time inhabiting a state of your own finitude? You are here, and yet you are coming to an end. That is itself pretty paradoxical, you can say. Does it make sense? Well, art, in a sense, responds to that paradox. Art is always dealing with this absurdity of being present and not present all at the same time. Being present to your own absence at the same time as you are present to your own presence. I've been doing that, since the very early days, and that for that reason, there is no progress in art, because this condition never changes. Art always responds to this paradox of existence. So, if art is making sense, it betrays its main role. Its role is not to make sense. Its role is to somehow reflect back to you the paradoxical condition of your own existence. And it is paradoxical and scary and terrible, you could say uncanny. And art usually finds ways of reflecting this condition back to us. So as long as human beings live in a state of finitude, art will not make sense. Now, it's very possible that at some point that will change, and then there will be another art. So that is the second point I wanted to make. So don't seek to explain art. Don't go for trying to understand it rationally. The question is always one of experience. If there is an experience there, then it is doing something. If there is no experience, then it might be not good art. That is also possible. And there is a lot of that as well. So, third, untimely meditation. Any color, as long as it's black. So, photography, since its very invention, was always doing just one thing. It was always taking the world which is outside the photograph and somehow encapsulating it, preserving it, inscribing it into the surface of the photograph. So this relationship seems to me to be a very permanent feature of the whole photographic practice. So here you have image, and the image relates to something which is outside of the image. So the image always relates to the space which is outside of the photograph. And this seems to me a kind of a permanent feature of photography, or at least that's how it used to be. So that is just like what Henry Ford said about his Mark T, that you can have it in any color as long as it's black. You can have any kind of photography as long as it deals with this external space. That is in itself a very impoverished place to be. If your chosen discipline, if your chosen practice can do only one thing, what good it is? You know, what can, you know, then it's kind of, it's the end of the story. Everything else, it seems to me, can do many other things. And, you know, even something as simple as a fountain has a shape, it has a sound, it can produce humidity, you can sit in its shadow, it can do all these different things. And yet with photography it's only one thing. It's always the space outside of the image somehow represented inside the image. This understanding of what is the task of photography has certain consequences. One of them is that this obsession with taking something and representing it in a picture always privileges the notion of space over the notion of time. Yeah? So because we always look at the photograph as a window onto another world, or the same world but in another place, we can look at the photograph and we can see the pyramids. Okay, so that's what the pyramids look like. We can look at the photograph and we can see this, I don't know, underwater fauna. So that's what ocean, the bottom of the ocean looks like. So that's what the rocks on Mars look like. All these things, photography can happily deliver, basically bringing all these faraway places to us in the shape of the photograph. But for that to happen, space always takes precedence over time. What gets forgotten in the photograph is that it is also about time. But what kind of time? Well, that slightly relates to what I said earlier about finitude. Yeah? For as long as a photograph has no way of dealing with time and with finitude and with the paradox of being and not being at the same time, photography has no chance to be an art form. Because as we established earlier, art deals with this paradox of existence. And for photography to be able to assume its place among the arts, it has to somehow find a way to leave its obsession with space to one side and become interested in time, in the lived time, in the time of the experience. That's where photography can find its own sensuality, its own desire, its own eroticism. Because what is this lived time I'm talking about? It's not the time of the ticking clock. It's not even the time, let's say, of the sunrise and sunset. It's not even what Henry Bergson calls duration or durée as the experienced time. It's something to do with, this moment when you are in love and time kind of stands still, and time either stretches or flies by. So it can be called erotic time, sensual time. And in photography, it is expressed in the form of this photographic exposure as this perfect duration, as this perfect moment in which the shutter is open for a certain interval, and in this moment the light and the sensitive surface and the things that reflect light, it's all kind of coming together to form this perfect moment of exposure, like a lightning that slices through a dark sky at night. This is the essence of photographic time. But this really amazing notion of temporality that photography affords us and puts in front of us, this notion of time as momentary and perfect and endlessly repeated, because what happens after an exposure? Another exposure, another perfect moment. It can have a different duration, but it's just as perfect. And another exposure follows another exposure. And as that constitutes the experience of photography as these tiny moments, tiny affective shocks of exposure. However, all this different experience of time afforded through photography is unavailable to us as long as we obsess with what the picture is about. So if you want to really get the sense of what photography can do for you, and in a minute I will say why you might want to do that, you need to be able to forget what is the content of the image and ask some other questions. Ask questions about what is the duration of this image, what is its time, what is its what exactly it does. So we go on kind of in a spiral. We covered a little bit of territory. I just want to say where I think we are at the moment. The first thing that we put here on the table is that this new brave digital world we so nonchalantly walked into is unknown to us. It operates on different rules, on different principles to what we've been used to for the last 2,000 years and maybe longer. This new world is here. It already took possession of us. We must find its own internal logic and learn how to work with it. Otherwise, it will overpower us, as it already very often does. So what is this new logic? It's a logic in which binary oppositions stop working. Far away and near doesn't work. Good and bad doesn't work. Male and female doesn't work because you are an avatar. So what kind of gender that is? Intimate and strange doesn't work because you can be intimate with people whom you never even met. All these things, all these very familiar categories that all appeal to some transcendental values dissipate. And instead what we get? We get this fantastic technology that we can call the internet, or you can call it photography, but it's basically the same thing, that puts us in touch with a different notion of time. What kind of time? Well, can you imagine, for instance, going to Google or going to Amazon and asking it to show you what you saw yesterday? Well, that's never possible, because there is no yesterday online. There's only the present moment. And the present moment is always your present moment, because if you will go to your browser, if you will log in as you and not as me, your present will be different, but it's always this present. So I'm suggesting that this present moment that you find when you have had this embarrassing moment that you open Amazon with someone looking behind your shoulder and they see all the silly things you were searching for, last night, and this is your present, yeah. So I'm saying that this present moment of this online environment has something in common with this exposure of photography. Is this technologically produced time, very different from the biological time, very different from the chronological time, but it is a time that only happens in the present and only holds you in the now. And it is different from everyone, but everyone has their own technological present. So how we learn to live and to make love and to make a fight and to make politics in this notion of the present. That is the question, and that's why I think this is a very political show. So, New Weapons is a very is an opposite, it's an appropriate title. It is about new weapons because the terrain of the battlefield changed again. There was time when you could, sling a stone at someone. And in the Stone Age, if you could make good stone weapons, you had this one-upmanship over someone else. Yeah? So you had your stone weapons. And then what happens? Then the Bronze Age comes, and someone can come with a big sword and chop your head off. And what are you doing with this stone? It's just not going to help. Yeah? It became obsolete. So that is the kind of thing we're talking about. Yeah? And this technological moment of the online, of the web, is also the technological moment of photography. Why? Photography is the first of these technical moments when something really interesting, something strange is happening. The age we are living in now is called the age of technology. It's also sometimes called the information age. Now, what exactly it means? Let's try to unpack that a little bit. Previous age was called the industrial age. Yeah? So what do we know about the industrial age? In the industrial age, there were machines. Machines were powered by, for instance, steam or internal combustion, and they basically replaced human physical labor with the labor of the machine. Yeah? So you didn't need slaves to work in cotton fields anymore because you have now machines that pick cotton. That's not, you can call it progress. Yeah? But realize that this is not because we became somehow better people and we realized that slavery is somehow not good. Slavery is still just as good. It simply was not viable anymore because the machine could do these kind of things better. Yeah? So that was the industrial age when machines replaced physical labor. But they replaced physical labor not by repeating exactly how your muscles operate. They done it in a different way. Yeah, because a steam train is not a replica of human feet or a horse's feet. It's doing a similar job, but it's doing it in a different way. Now, along the way, this industrial age not only liberated humans from a lot of physical toll, it also completely reshaped human society. Distances shrunk, you could travel very fast, people started to commute, suburbs appeared, the nuclear family appeared, agricultural lifestyle and all these values got abandoned, religion disappeared. All these things happened in connection with this industrial age. Okay, now we are in the age of technology or in the age of information. And what does it mean? It means that we are now dealing with a new kind of machine. Not a machine that replaces physical labor, but a machine that replaces intellectual labor. The labor of the brain, for instance. Yeah? Now, just everything I said about the industrial age applies to the age of information. The computer which is the machine that replaces the work of the brain, is not operating according to the same principles as the brain. You know, the steam train is not mechanical legs. You know, a car is not a mechanical horse, and the computer is not a mechanical brain. It's another thing that operates on a different logic. Yeah, our logic, human logic, is near, far, good, bad, friend, foe, male, female. Computers don't get any of that. They have a different logic. They can achieve with it similar results to ours and much more, but their logic is different. Okay, you got that. Next step. Just as in the industrial age, these machines not only freed us from a lot of labor, they also reshaped human society to a very radical extent. The age of technology, the age of the computer, is also reshaping human society according to the internal logic of the computer. Okay. Now, for that reason, when I'm saying we need to understand how this online environment operates, and it is really a question of politics and a question of desire and a question of life and death. These are not empty words. In the industrial age, the person who understood better than anyone else that this age of industry reshapes human society, who was that? Karl Marx, absolutely right. Yes. This is the moment, you know, that waits for its Karl Marx to understand how the age of the computer reshapes what is left of human society, or of what we mean by the human. So that's why, again, I think the work that is done in this show is so important. These are the first foundations, the first insights into the way this reshaping is taking place. Okay. Fourth untimely meditation. What shall we save from a burning house? Or how to survive the digital age? So, Johnny Golding once told this story about Jacques Cocteau, who he was interviewed by some journalists, and they asked him this very famous, lazy journalistic question. What will you save from a burning house? Your favorite cat or a painting by Rembrandt? Cocteau's reply was, I will save the fire. Now, why it's so good? First, because whenever you are offered a binary choice, reject it. Don't go for binaries. If you are offered either or, the person who offers it to you is a foe, is not your friend. Yeah? Always, but always, save the fire. Yeah? The fire is the desire. The fire desires to burn. It has no other business than to burn. The fire is this burning force. Save the force. Forget the binaries. Yeah? It's very important that you kind of hear that right. Because this is the lay of the land. Do you have at home a film camera that you didn't use for many years? What happened to it? It became obsolete. So how do you stop yourself from becoming obsolete? Well, I think the best way not to become obsolete is to try to have fun. Have fun with all this technology. Enjoy it. It is completely amazing. It's amazing what this technology can do. It is really mind-blowing. Not only photography or your smartphone or Skype, but this technological world it's fabulous. But like a fire, it's force. You can make a barbecue, or you can burn the house. Yeah, I wouldn't advise either. But that's just a fire. Yeah, or like for instance, Hollywood. The film industry in Hollywood. If people want to drag me into the discussion whether Hollywood films are good or bad, whether Hollywood is, don't go there. It is a force. It can do great things, and it can do fantastic things, and it can do the most terrible ones as well. How do you use the force? That is the question. Yeah? Avoid these moral judgments, because what you need to understand is that there is no depth anymore. There is no distinction between surface and depth. This is a stool, okay? So it has a surface, right? What happens if you peel the surface off? What will you find underneath? Another surface. It's surface all the way down. It's only surface. That is how online environment operates. Yeah? So, you cannot use dialectics to understand online because computers are not dialectical. And that's why, even though Marx was the genius philosopher of the industrial age, Marx does not help when it comes to the digital age, because dialectics do not work in the age of computers. For that reason, strikes these days always fail. I'm sorry to say, unions are not effective. Why? Because they still operate on dialectical premises, not understanding that if you really want to make something political, you need to understand YouTube. You need to understand hashtags. That's where you can really make things happen, not in a strike, because this mode of, let's not go to the factory and then there will be no shoe production and then we will get what we want. That only worked when there was production. Yeah? In an age when the only thing produced is information, not turning up to work, it really doesn't bother anyone. Okay, so you will not go to work, so you will not update your Facebook status at work. And so what? Nothing happened. You need to find other forms of resistance. What are these forms? Well, again, I think what is happening here today begins to put some meat on the bones of this question. So more on how to survive this digital moment. Do not try to avoid contradictions. Live with it. There are paradoxes. Learn how to use them, not close your eyes to them. Learn how to work with the absurd. Learn how to make the absurd work for you. It has massive power, It is absurd that you can go online, pay your electricity bill, only dealing with images. The company that supplies you with electricity is an image. What you pay them is an image, and then you get some real electricity that powers all your devices. But it is kind of absurd. You want another example of an absurd? Here. Before coming here, I downloaded some songs to my iPad. Okay, so I have about 50,000 songs on this thing. And I can play them to you. But if I break the iPad right now here, will the songs fall out? Where are the songs? Where are they? They're here because I can play them and get them not here. They're both here and not here. This both is really the key to the way you can live in this digital age, in this digital moment. It's all about suspecting any either-or proposition. Either you have some songs here or you don't have some songs here. It's one or the other. When not, it's both. They are here and they are not here. You need to learn how that logic works, because this is exactly the logic of the computer. It might sound a little bit fanciful to you to say that the logic of the computer is kind of absurd or contradictory, but if you look at Turing machines, the basic computational device is based on a paradox. And in mathematics, it is the paradox of the sets. Yeah, and some of you might know about it, but I don't think I want to go into great detail. But for instance, Gödel, the great mathematician of the 20th century, taught us that even the most basic arithmetics will never be able to be fully proved or disproved from within itself. No system can fully prove or disprove itself within itself. So every system contains within itself some potential for a paradox. So there was this island with a strange rule. When a stranger arrives on the island, the governor says, "Tell us a sentence. If it is true, you will be hanged. If it is false, you will be shot." And that's how it used to go for a long time. Until one day, a new person arrives on the island and the governor tells them, "Tell us a sentence. If it is true, you will be hanged. If it is false, you will be shot." And the person says, "I will be shot." Yeah? That's paradox. That's how computers work. That is contemporary mathematics. That's why it's also called fuzzy logic. It's fuzzy. Yeah? This is the fuzziness we are talking about. In Plato's ideas, in Plato's cave, there was no fuzziness. It was either a shadow of true knowledge or true knowledge. There was no in-between state. Yeah? And that is precisely what we wanted to leave in this house with the Rembrandt and the cat. You know, that's precisely what we don't want to take with us. You know, all we want is to rescue the passion, the fighting spirit, the battle cry. So, and finally, one more thing for this fourth meditation on the digital age. Stop asking what it is the image of. Stop asking what it represents. Ask instead how it works. Yeah? That might be a picture of your dog or of your grandmother when she was 17. And that's one thing, and it's important, and it will always be there. We're not endangering that part of photography, but also ask, how does it work? How does it do that? Yeah? Ask about, don't ask what something is, ask how it works. That will allow you to avoid these essential transcendental notions that the surface is not the truth. The surface is the truth. Figure out how the surface works. That is the most urgent political task. Fifth, untimely meditation. Tweets from the Stone Age. So, you have this archaeological museum down the road, and I went there yesterday, and it has the most amazing collection of Neolithic art. Absolutely stunning. And one thing that really caught my eye are these spirals, these kind of conical spirals that seem to appear in many locations, on stone, on pottery, on cave walls. So what is that? What kind of sense we can make of it? Now there are various, and there are very helpful signs that tell you that there are various interpretations, and some, it can be a lot of things, and we're probably never going to find out what that spiral, what these spirals meant for the people who drew them. We can have various theories, you can write books about it. But it seems to me that one thing we can say about these spirals, which is kind of resonates, and that whatever is the meaning of the spiral, of these spirals, it's also the expression of someone's desire to make a spiral. Someone had suddenly this newfound ability to do that, and it was fun. It was great fun. just as much fun as it is to discover that you have a voice, and you can sing and you can scream, and it just comes out, and it's kind of amazing, You just have this power, you just have this energy, and it just comes out, and suddenly you can move your finger in a cycle, in a circle like this, and you make this cyclical shape, and it was mind-blowing. And that, I think, is present in these spirals, whether they are crop circles or a meditation on the cycle of life, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that the walls here, we can notice this power, this ability, and that it is so much fun. Okay. So that's what I think is happening here in this exhibition. These are the cave paintings from the digital age. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Does anyone have any questions, or you can start some kind of
You make some very interesting points about digital technology.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble with it. Okay, but just a question, just to maybe provoke a discussion. Why did you come here? Why did you fly to Malta to deliver your speech instead of Skyping it?
That's a very good question. One second. Because
You have to choose the fire now.
because, and that's something that I really want to have the opportunity to say, because I think it is important. What Alex is doing here, I think, is absolutely incredible. It is really astonishing, because Alex and Bonomi brought here something that is happening right now, not yesterday, more of this very moment. And it is a privilege to be at a place where something is really happening. Just because we have now the digital age, it does not mean we don't have history anymore. It does not mean that we don't have families or relationships, and it is not nice to be in a room full of people and feel this energy. It's all there, and there is something else. And it is this something else that we need to start to understand in order to be able to operate within this environment. Yeah. So until very recently, there was only one thing. It was this Cartesian approach to life. First Platonic, then Cartesian, Newtonian. It was all the same thing. To put it very simply, here is your head, and this is the body. And the head is in control of the body. So in Rodin's thinker, you have the thinker, just sitting there, contemplating the world with this kind of big masculine mind, and then represents it as an image or a sculpture. Now, that is all still there. That is not going anywhere. But there is also something else. And it is this something else that this show starts to unravel. It is nothing else than a provocation, an attempt to show how little we understand of the space we found ourselves in. Does that answer the question?
Mine wasn't even a question, I was more trying to provoke a discussion, as I said. But Is it threatening the space?
Threatening.
Yes.
It's not so much threatening the space, it's threatening our idea of what it means to be a human being. That is the question. What does it mean? What is life? Now, until very recently, everyone knew what life is, even though scientists don't know how to kind of define it. But you could pretty much tell the difference between, let's say, a hammer and a cow. A cow is alive and a hammer is not. But what about Dory the sheep? Dory the sheep, the sheep that was created in a laboratory. Is it a hammer or a cow or both? It's kind of both. It's both a test tube and a living creature. How is that possible? What we understand about life is itself undergoing complete redefinition right now. And you don't even need to go to artificial intelligence and cyborgs and zombies, even though all these things will happen in our own lifetime and are already happening. Dory the sheep kind of puts it on the table very clearly. The distinction we used to entertain between technology on one hand and human being on the other, or any being on the other, is abundant. There is no distinction. Technology is life. Life is technological. Yeah? Desire, by the way, is the technology of life. So what is at stake is not so much space, but what does it mean to be human? And what does it mean also to work or to produce? Because we kind of in your lovely Malta, it might be easier to kind of forget that the way we operate in the world kind of has consequences. It kind of, it sort of does various things. Some of them are great, some of them are pretty devastating. The other day in Texas, they passed a law that makes it illegal. Now listen to that. It makes it illegal to make fracking illegal. So any attempt from now on to ban fracking is illegal. You know what fracking is? Yeah. This is a pretty intrusive way of getting to the last bits of gas and oil. And now they passed a law because a while ago in Texas they banned fracking because local people kind of didn't like it happening, and it's also quite dangerous on many levels. So now they passed a law that makes it illegal to ban these operations. Yeah. So this is pretty mind-blowing. That's what we do to this little grain of sand on which we have everything. As far at the moment we don't have anywhere else to go, even though people are already being trained to go to Mars and set up colonies there. But if they set up colonies according to these principles, they will need to have another Mars. They will need a bigger spaceship. So that's what it's saying. That's why new ways of working, new ways of making things need to be developed if we really want to stay on this little planet. And for that reason, we will have to find a way to come together and work differently. Art is always about work. Art is work that is made visible in the artwork. And that's why it's called artwork. And that's, I think, what you see here. Some experiments around the question of what this new way of working collectively, together, what it might look like. We either find a way of doing things in a different way, or we will not be. Both of which are very happy outcomes.
It's a very existentialist statement.
Existentialist. Why do you say that?
You spoke about the finality of the fact that we are at the same time. And now you're saying that it doesn't really make a difference, if I understood correctly, whether we are, whether we continue, or whether we don't.
No, I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said both of them are good outcomes.
Oh, right.
Why? Why? Because both of them make us understand that human culture is not eternal. Nothing is eternal. Everything is finite. Whether we come together and discover how to be a new human being that looks after its environment, we either do that or we will not be. But in both cases, we are already in the presence of the impossibility of carrying on the way we are now. Because if we carry on the way we are now, we will not be. So what, I still remember how my teachers and, my whole upbringing was pretty much assumed for granted that human culture is kind of here to stay forever, at least until the sun will be switched off, But that's a very, very long time ago. We're not talking about that time frame. We're talking about the next, 100 years. Yeah, that completely redefines what we understand by being human. Yeah, and that to me is a joyous outcome.
One thing which maybe I don't need to touch on is the idea of experiments.
Yes.
In the sense, well, one of the human beings that we're fighting. When it comes to we are speaking about the digital and the something like this difference between them. And the idea that we have something which is physical, the experiment is where its physicality makes it more variable somehow than something that is in the sense that, for example, the way we can see it, because it's physical, is always going to be the same. It's something that you could have, that you could own, you can always see it when it's there. If it's something which is online, if it's something which is digital, it depends on technology. Technology changes, then the relation that we have with that object is going to change as well, as long as it's very complete. So what is your take on that? In the sense, in the way we're moving maybe towards the idea of things that are more digital rather than...
I'm not sure I understood the question. At first I don't hear you very well, and that's because of the fan. So that's part of the problem. I guess maybe that's the main problem. So can you try to say again?
Yes. Right. So
and maybe a little louder because I really find it.
So what I'm trying to mean, what I say is that if we have something which is physical,
yes,
then there is the way we interact with it is always going to be the same in the sense that we can touch it, we can see it. If it's a photo, for example, it's a printed photo, then we can all see it the same way. Right? If it's digital, if it's online, then it depends on the technology that's being the medium that is being shown. So if the technology changes, then it's going to change what that object is, or if we can see it anymore. For example, if we cannot read a file format anymore, or we cannot read a hard disk anymore because the technology changed, then what happens to those things?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference on how finite things are, if they're physical or if they're digital.
Yes, you can say that. But what is interesting is that because of this digital moment, when we are forced to start thinking in a different way, because computers, as I was saying, are operating according to a different logic, we can look back at the material world and the world of prints and physical things like tables and chairs, and also the familiar distinctions between mind and body, spirit and matter, and understand that they were wrong from the start. We used to think, for 2,000 years, we live under this spell of this transcendental illusion called representation, according to which the our main engagement with the world is by representing it to ourselves as a picture. That's how the whole of science operates. The world is being catalogued and described and filed. And because we can do that, then we can achieve great things. But what we now understand, that this approach itself is the root of the problem. Not only because once you start representing the world, I mean, let's just see how exactly this logic operates. Because we consider ourselves reasonable human beings that operate with logic and not with paradox, and operate according to the rational decisions and not according to desire, then we can make rational pictures of the world, and based on these pictures we can learn about the world. That's all very well. As I said, it is very effective. But there is a big chunk of experience that becomes unavailable to us when we work in that way. Everything to do with fantasy, dream, hallucination, orgasm, you name it, everything that falls outside this rational framework becomes unavailable to us. We just don't want to know. Yeah, that's why science has very clear parameters, what it investigates and what it doesn't want to know about. But we understand now through the digital moment that this approach is unsustainable. It really brought us into this situation in which the whole of our world and our other human beings and ourselves are seen as a resource to exploit and to use. Yeah. That is the outcome of this representational model. So this digital moment, which forces us to rethink this very basic premise of putting the rational mind in the middle of the universe, is also kind of helping, or can help at least, in the material world as well.
Why do you think this exhibition needed to be exhibited physically and not online?
Because online is physical. Online is not only online. Have you ever navigated through the city by following a red dot on your phone? So is it online or is it physical? It's both. It's both, exactly, yeah. Online is everywhere. There is no part of our life which is not to some extent online. It's like, in photography again, a few years ago, people always used to say, should I go digital? Do you think I should go digital? Do you think I should? And they meant by this, should I sell my Nikon, my analog Nikon, my film Nikon, and invest in a digital camera? But guess what? You are already digital. It's not up to you to decide whether you go digital or not. It already took over. As I said, this boat sailed. This is a digital show. It doesn't need to be on the screen to be digital. It is digital because it is using a different logic, not the logic of representation, in which you look at the picture to ask what is behind it and how it relates to the world outside, but you look at something and you ask how it is made. And the question of making is really, as I was saying, it is the most essential political question. And the work here is not dialectical. It's not operating along these lines of either or, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, as the Hegelians and the Marxists say. It's not operating according to the idea of here you have base and here you have superstructure. Here you have industrial processes and here you have art. What you have here is an industrial process which is art, and art which is the industrial process. And you cannot separate the two, just like you cannot separate the two sides of a sheet of paper. They are forever attached. And how do we call this environment that is where the artwork and technology are completely fused together to form one surface. We call it online. And for that reason, photography...
But photography is that technology.
Exactly. And for that reason, when we say photography, we basically mean the current postmodern cultural moment.
But when you mentioned going digital, you didn't have a choice because it was going there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that a photographer taking digital photography is as talented as the good photographer who was before taking the proper photography and developing it? Do you see any difference between the two?
No.
I see it.
No, because I don't think there is such thing as a photographer. Photography is a process without a producer. No one makes photographs. I will give you an example. A washing machine. Do you have a washing machine? Okay. So I have a washing machine. I take my laundry basket and I take it to the kitchen and I stuff all the dirty laundry into the machine and I pour the chemicals and I close the door and I press the button. Okay. And then it spins, and then it's finished. So my question is, who did the laundry? Is it me? Is it the machine? Is it the engineers? Is it the people on the conveyor belt that put it together? Is it the logistics people who delivered it? Who did the laundry? It was done. There's no question. It's smells nice and doesn't have stains. So it was done, but who made it? And it's a mystery. Why it's a mystery? Because the washing machine is a black box. We don't know what is going on inside it. Photography is also a black box. You press a button, a picture comes out. Who made it?
But if you're pressing the button and you don't know what you're seeing, and the muscle is developed and the result is great, it's much better than having something, taking a photo, not liking it, deleting it, and taking the next one.
But we agree that we don't work with good or bad. So you cannot use words like great. all that is left is a force. There is a certain force here, and you can use it. You can learn to use it. So stop thinking in terms of good or bad. Think in terms of being how to maximize your force. Think about in terms of being weak or being powerful. So you can think about social media. You can be a complete jerk on social media. That means that you are weak. Or you can use it to do something outrageous, something provocative, something shocking or sublime or just disgusting. And that means that you are powerful. The choice is yours. Yeah? That's what it means to be free. You are free when you are operating at the peak of your powers. For that reason, being powerful is not about being physically strong. You can be physically weak, but know how to maneuver. You can be smaller and know how to manipulate. Yeah? That's what it means to be free, and that's what it means to be an artist. To learn how to use force. But to get there, you must stop thinking in terms of good or bad. You don't need to make good art, make powerful art.
I'm sorry, but again, that's not new. I'm sure you would agree that art was never about good or bad.
Of course. Nothing I said today is new.
No, it doesn't belong to the digital age.
I think what I kind of want you to understand is that the digital age was always there. It was always already there. We only now, it kind of got pushed into our faces, and now we cannot ignore it anymore, even though people try really hard to keep pretending that it's not there. But this, technology and human beings always had this internally merged relationship. Because why are we here? Well, we are here because our parents had sex. Yeah? And what is that? That's reproduction. Yeah? So without reproduction, we wouldn't be here. Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't need to carry this image with you for too long. But without reproduction, we wouldn't be here. What is reproduction? It's a technical process. This is a reproduced object. Yeah? Without reproduction, it wouldn't be here. Yeah? So, reproduction is life. Reproduction is also how things being made in the world. Technology and life is one and the same thing. And interestingly, and for some strange reason, photography is able to make us a picture of that. So photography is not, it can always be a picture of a flower for your grandmother, of your first car, or anything like that, of all these things. And it's wonderful, it's really great that you can do that, you know. Memories are powerful and we shouldn't lose them. But also, it tells you something about the essence of your own being. It tells you something about this very process that we call life, that is somehow also the technology of reproduction.
Good. Thank you, Daniel. Actually, I don't know if I should say that it was good or great. It's not the right thing to
Just
say.
say, was it powerful? Okay.
When the space is open to 7, so you're welcome to carry a conversation over cold beer downstairs.
Okay.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.